The ships came out of nowhere. One moment, the stars looked normal. The next moment, they were blocked out by massive alien vessels that made Earth's biggest space stations look like toys. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching the alien fleet spread across space like a dark cloud. He had seen many things in his 30 years of military service, but nothing like this. The alien ships were huge, made of what looked like crystal and metal mixed together. They glowed with a cold blue light that hurt to look at. "Sir, we're getting a message," said Lieutenant Park, his communications officer. The young man's voice shook as he spoke. "It's in perfect Korean, English, and 12 other languages." The main screen flickered and a creature appeared. It was tall, maybe 3 meters high, with 4 arms and a head that looked like a mix between an insect and a machine. Its voice was cold and emotionless when it spoke. "People of Earth. I am Commander Veltar of the Valeth Empire. Your planet has been selected for integration into our domain. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. All military forces will lay down their weapons. All governments will dissolve. You will become workers in our mining operations." The creature paused, its black eyes reflecting no emotion. "To show you the cost of resistance, we will now demonstrate our power." The screen switched to show the moon. Earth's research station there was home to 300 scientists and workers. Hyunwoo watched in horror as a beam of pure white light shot from one of the alien ships. The research station simply vanished. Not destroyed, not blown up, it just stopped existing, leaving only empty space where it had been. 72 hours, the alien repeated. "Choose wisely." The message ended, leaving the bridge in terrible silence. Captain So-min's voice crackled over the radio from her stealth ship, the Silent Arrow. "Admiral, I'm returning from my scout run. You need to see what I found." An hour later, So-min stood in the briefing room, her face pale. She had gotten closer to the alien fleet than anyone else, using her ship's advanced stealth systems to scan the enemy vessels. "Their technology is beyond anything we have," she reported. "Their shields could stop every nuclear weapon on Earth without even flickering. Their weapons can destroy our biggest ships with a single shot. And sir," she paused, "there are over 2,000 ships in that fleet." The room filled with worried voices. Earth's entire space navy had maybe 50 ships that could fight in deep space. The numbers were impossible. Dr. Taeho, Earth's top scientist, had been quiet during the briefing. Now he spoke up. "Captain So-min, did you notice anything strange about their energy patterns?" So-min looked confused. "Strange how, Doctor?" "The way their power flows, the way their systems work together. Show me the readings again." As the data appeared on the screen, Taeho studied it carefully. His face slowly changed from worry to something that might have been hope. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the energy patterns. "Everything they do follows perfect mathematical rules. Every system works exactly as it should. There's no waste, no randomness, no—" He searched for the right word. "No creativity. Is that bad for them?" asked Admiral Hyunwoo. "Maybe," Taeho said slowly. "Their ships are perfect machines. But machines can only do what they're programmed to do. They can't think outside their programming." Meanwhile, on Mars, Sergeant Jae-sung gathered his colonial marines in their barracks. These were hard men and women who had fought pirates, rebels, and each other in the outer colonies. They had volunteered to come to Earth when the alien ships appeared. "Listen up," Jae-sung told his troops. "I've been fighting for 20 years. I've seen tough enemies before, but I've never seen an enemy that expected us to just give up without a fight." He looked around the room at faces that showed no fear, only anger. "These aliens think we're just another species to push around. They think we'll roll over and show our bellies like scared dogs." He smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "That's their first mistake." Private Nam, barely 18 years old, raised her hand. "Sergeant, what's their second mistake?" "Giving us 72 hours to get ready," Jae-sung replied. "If they were smart, they would have just attacked. Now we have time to show them what humans do when someone threatens our home." Back on Earth, the emergency session of the Global Defense Council was not going well. Politicians from every nation argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Most just wanted someone else to make the decision. President Kim of the Pacific Federation stood up. "We've all seen what their weapons can do. We can't win a straight fight." "So we don't fight straight," said Admiral Hyunwoo. "Dr. Taeho thinks their technology has weaknesses. Captain So-min's data shows they rely on predictable patterns. Maybe we can use that." "Use it how?" demanded the European representative. They have 2,000 ships. They have 2,000 ships that all work the same way, Yunwu replied. Ships crewed by aliens who think like machines. They've probably never fought anyone who didn't follow the rules of war. In his lab, Dr. Tejo worked frantically with his team. They had pieces of alien technology recovered from the destroyed moon station, small fragments that had been blown free when the research station was vaporized. Look at this, said Dr. Lee, his assistant. Their metal is incredibly strong, but it's also incredibly regular. Every molecule is in perfect order. What happens to perfect order when you introduce chaos? Tejo wondered aloud. As the 72-hour deadline approached, something strange happened. Instead of panic, instead of despair, humans around the world began to smile. Not happy smiles, but the kind of smile a person gets when they decide to do something crazy. On social media, videos appeared of people making homemade weapons. Engineers shared plans for turning civilian spacecraft into weapons. Hackers offered to help break alien computer systems. Children drew pictures of humans beating up monsters that looked like the aliens. The aliens had made their ultimatum clear: surrender or die. Humanity's answer was becoming clear too. If we're going to die anyway, let's make it interesting. Admiral Hyunwoo looked out at the alien fleet one more time. In 18 hours, the deadline would arrive. Earth's military was preparing for the impossible. The odds were hopeless. The enemy was stronger, faster, and had better technology. But humans had something the aliens didn't understand. They had spite. They had stubbornness. They had the ability to look at impossible odds and grin. Signal all ships, Hyunwoo ordered. Prepare for battle. And remind everyone, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to show these aliens what happens when you threaten the human family. The countdown continued. Soon the aliens would learn why humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every other disaster their planet could throw at them. They were about to discover that humans don't know how to quit. The deadline came with Earth's answer, but it wasn't the answer the aliens expected. Commander Unji checked her shuttle one last time. It looked like a normal surrender vessel. White paint, peaceful markings, and a small crew. What the aliens couldn't see were the 50 nuclear warheads packed into every available space, or the fact that Yunji and her crew had no plans to come back alive. Control, this is Dove 1, she radioed. Beginning surrender approach to alien flagship. All across Earth's orbital space, 19 other surrender shuttles began the same journey. Each one carried enough nuclear weapons to level a city. Each crew had volunteered, knowing they would die in the next hour. The alien ships waited, confident and still. They had received surrender messages from Earth's governments. Everything was going according to plan. Dove 1 to all birds. Yunji transmitted on a coded frequency. Remember, we go in smiling. If we're going to die today, let's make sure they remember us. On the bridge of the alien flagship, Commander Veltar watched the human shuttles approach. The creatures were finally showing sense. Soon Earth would be another mining world in the Valeth Empire. Commander, said one of his officers, the human vessels are requesting permission to dock for formal surrender ceremonies. Granted, Veltar replied. Begin preparing holding areas for human leaders. What he didn't know was that every shuttle had its nuclear weapons set to detonate the moment they made contact with alien hulls. Yunji felt her shuttle bump against the alien docking port. Through her helmet radio, she could hear her crew singing an old Earth song about going down fighting. She smiled and pressed the detonation button. For humanity, she whispered. 20 nuclear explosions lit up space at the same moment. The alien ships designed to handle energy weapons had never faced primitive fusion bombs delivered at point-blank range. Their perfect shields flickered and failed as massive chunks of their hulls were torn away. But the nuclear attack was only the beginning. Jin-Ho sat in Earth's Cyber Warfare Center, surrounded by screens and computers. He had been a hacker before the war, breaking into corporate systems for fun. Now he was breaking into alien minds. Signal lock established, he announced. Beginning data assault. For weeks, his team had studied the alien communication frequencies captured from moon station debris. They had learned that the aliens shared information through a kind of mental network. Everything they knew together. Now Jin-Ho was about to introduce chaos into that perfect system. The first thing he transmitted was music. Specifically, heavy metal rock music played at maximum volume. The aliens, used to organized mathematical communication, suddenly had their mental network flooded with screaming guitars and pounding drums. Then came the memes. Thousands of silly pictures, jokes, and random thoughts from human internet culture poured into the alien network. Cat videos, funny pictures with weird text, videos of people doing stupid things and laughing about it. Finally, Jinho sent mathematical paradoxes, equations that had no answer, problems that couldn't be solved, questions that ate their own tails. The alien minds designed for perfect logic began to stutter and freeze as they tried to process impossible data. "Sir," reported his assistant, "alien fleet formation is breaking up. They're showing signs of confusion." Jinho grinned and started transmitting human poetry. If math puzzles confuse them, wait until they tried to understand why humans wrote about love and death and the color of flowers. In space, the battle was not going according to any military manual ever written. Mi Young led a squadron of modified civilian ships against the alien fighters. Her ship used to deliver mail between space stations. Now it carried missiles and had engines that could push far beyond safe limits. "Remember," she transmitted to her pilots, "we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to survive long enough to hurt them." The alien fighters moved in perfect formation, executing textbook maneuvers. They were faster and stronger than the human ships. But they were also predictable. Mi Young waited until the alien formation was exactly where she expected, then dove her ship directly toward an asteroid. At the last second, she used her ship's cargo bay magnets to grab the space rock and swing it like a club into the alien fighter behind her. The alien pilot, programmed for space combat, had no response for being hit by a rock wielding a postal ship. His fighter spun out of control and crashed into two of his wingmates. "Asteroid bowling," Mi Young laughed. "New sport, who wants to try?" Her pilots began copying the tactic, using space debris, cargo containers, and anything else they could grab as weapons. The aliens, trained for civilized warfare, found themselves fighting opponents who threw rocks, rammed damaged ships into their formations, and used their own destroyed vessels as missiles. But the strangest battle was happening inside the alien ships themselves. Sergeant Jae Sung and his Marines had used the nuclear explosions as cover to board damaged alien vessels. They moved through the ship's corridors, fighting with simple projectile weapons against aliens armed with energy beams. "Why aren't you dead?" demanded an alien warrior as Jae Sung's squad gunned it down with old-fashioned bullets. "Because," Jae Sung replied, reloading his rifle. "Humans are too stupid to know when we're beaten." The aliens had energy shields that could stop laser beams and plasma bolts, but they had never faced solid metal bullets fired from chemical explosives. Their perfect technology had no defense against primitive kinetic weapons. More importantly, they had no defense against human tactics. Private Nam took shrapnel in her leg but kept fighting. When her rifle ran out of ammunition, she used it as a club. When an alien's energy weapon burned through her armor, she pulled the pin on a grenade and hugged the creature. "See you in hell," she told it. The aliens, who valued efficiency and preservation of resources, couldn't understand enemies who fought with broken bones, who turned their own blood into weapons, who laughed as they died. Dr. Tejo watched the battle from Earth's command center, analyzing the alien responses. "They're adapting," he reported, "but slowly. Their ships are trying to compensate for our attacks, but they're doing it by the book. No creativity, no inspiration. Can we win?" asked Admiral Hyunwoo. "Not in a straight fight," Tejo admitted. "But we're not fighting straight. We're fighting human." On the screens, they could see the alien fleet beginning to retreat. Ships that had never known defeat were pulling back from an enemy they didn't understand. But humanity wasn't done. Commander Woo Jin led the pursuit in a ship built from alien wreckage and human stubbornness. The Revenge of Terra was ugly, dangerous, and held together by spare parts and pure spite. It also carried the most dangerous cargo in the solar system, human survivors who had nothing left to lose. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "the aliens are requesting a ceasefire. They want to negotiate." Woo Jin looked around his bridge at faces that showed no mercy, only grim determination. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that humans don't negotiate with people who threaten our families. Tell them they started this fight, but we're going to finish it." The alien fleet limped away from Earth, expecting the primitive humans to celebrate their victory and tend their wounds. They had underestimated human spite before. They were about to make an even bigger mistake. As the last alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Hyunwoo issued new orders to the human fleet. All ships prepare for pursuit. We're going hunting. Sir, asked Captain Somin, our ships are damaged. We've lost half our fleet. Shouldn't we rebuild first? Hyunwoo looked at the space where the moon's research station used to be, where 300 humans had died simply for being in the way. No, he said. They wanted to show us what happens when we resist. Now we're going to show them what happens when you mess with the human family. The chase was about to begin. The alien fleet ran and humanity followed. Captain Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the Revenge of Terra, watching the stars stream past as his ship chased the retreating Valith fleet. His vessel was a monster built from salvaged alien technology and human desperation. Parts of it still glowed with alien energy, while other sections were held together with earth steel and determination. Sir, we're tracking their hyperspace trail, reported Lieutenant Song. They're heading for the Kepler system. Good, Dong-hyun replied. Let them run. Every light year they travel, they're wondering when we'll catch up. They're learning what it feels like to be hunted. The human pursuit fleet was small compared to the alien armada, only 15 ships that could make the journey to deep space. But these ships carried something the aliens had never encountered. Humans who had tasted victory and wanted more. Dr. Yu-jin worked in her mobile laboratory aboard the science vessel Discovery, studying captured Valith soldiers. The aliens sat in containment cells, their insect-like faces showing no emotion as she ran her tests. Fascinating, she muttered, looking at brain scans. Their neural pathways are almost completely uniform. Look at this, they literally think as one mind. Her assistant, Dr. Park, peered at the data. Is that why they're so organized? It's why they're so vulnerable, Yu-jin corrected. They've eliminated individual thought. They can't understand chaos because chaos requires individual creativity. When one of them encounters something new, they all encounter it the same way. She turned to face the captured aliens. That's why our tactics worked so well. They literally cannot predict irrational behavior. One of the aliens spoke, its voice flat and mechanical. You fight without honor. You use primitive weapons. You sacrifice yourself for no logical purpose, Yu-jin smiled. Exactly. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? The alien's head tilted slightly. Terror is inefficient. So is losing to humans with rocks and bullets, Yu-jin replied. But here we are. The hunt led humanity through star systems they had never seen before. In the Kepler system, they found their first evidence of the Valith Empire's true nature. Kang Min, serving as diplomatic officer, made contact with the surviving members of the Zelani species. The aliens looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large eyes. They lived in underground cities hiding from their Valith overlords. You fought them? Asked Zelani leader Torvan, his voice full of disbelief. You fought the Empire and lived? We did more than live, Kang Min replied. We hurt them. And now we're here to offer you something no one has given you in 50 years. What? A chance to fight back. Torvan looked around at his people who had spent decades living in fear. We tried to resist once. They destroyed our cities, killed billions of us. We learned to submit. They taught you to submit, Kang Min corrected. But humans can teach you something else. We can teach you to be angry. Within days, Zelani volunteers were learning human tactics from Sergeant Jae-sung and his Marines. They practiced with human weapons, studied human military history, and most importantly, learned human attitudes. The first rule of human warfare, Jae-sung told them, is that there are no rules. If the enemy expects you to do something else. If they think you'll run, charge. If they think you'll surrender, spit in their face. The Zelani were good students. They had 50 years of anger to draw on. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sung-ho led boarding parties against damaged Valith ships that couldn't escape the pursuit fleet. Each boarding action was a nightmare for the aliens. Humans who fought with broken weapons, who used their own bodies as shields for their comrades, who turned everyday objects into deadly tools. In one particularly vicious fight, Sung-ho's team found themselves trapped in an alien ship's engineering section. The Valith had superior numbers and position. Sir, whispered Corporal Lee, we're surrounded. They want us to surrender. Sung-ho looked around at his Marines, all of them wounded, all of them still grinning. Tell them we'll surrender, he said loudly, then whispered, when I give the signal, shoot everything that glows. When the aliens moved in to accept the surrender, Sung-ho's team opened fire on every piece of alien technology they could see. The ship's power systems overloaded, life support failed, and the vessel began tearing itself apart. Evacuation pods, Sung Ho shouted, leading his team toward the escape vehicles. Let's see how well these aliens swim in vacuum. As they ejected from the dying ship, Corporal Lee asked, "Sir, did we just destroy an entire alien vessel with small arms fire?" "No," Sung Ho replied, watching the alien ship explode. "We destroyed it with human creativity. But the real weapon in humanity's arsenal was Boram, a former entertainment executive who now ran psychological warfare operations. The key," she explained to her team, "is that the Valeth think collectively. When we broadcast to one of them, we're broadcasting to all of them." Her team had built transmission equipment from captured alien technology. Now they flooded Valeth communication channels with the most dangerous ideas in the universe: human concepts of individuality, creativity, and rebellion. They broadcast human music that celebrated being different. They transmitted human art that showed the beauty of chaos. They sent human stories about individuals who stood up to authority and won. Most dangerous of all, they broadcast the simple human idea that every person has the right to make their own choices. The effect on the Valeth collective mind was devastating. For the first time in their species' history, individual Valeth began to question orders. Some even refused to follow commands, choosing to think for themselves. Dr. Yu Jin monitored the psychological broadcasts from her laboratory. "It's working," she reported. "Their collective consciousness is fracturing. Individual Valeth are starting to experience what we call doubt." "Is that good or bad for us?" asked Captain Donghyun. "Good for us, terrible for them," Yu Jin replied. "They're not designed for individual thought. It's causing massive psychological trauma across their entire species." The hunt continued through 3 more star systems. In each one, humanity found enslaved species eager to learn the human way of war. The Kithra, who looked like humanoid cats, learned to fight with human ferocity. The Voraks, massive bear-like creatures, adopted human tactics of unpredictable assault. Each liberated world added ships to the human fleet. But more importantly, each species learned something new: hope. "We're not just chasing the Valeth anymore," observed Captain Somin during a fleet briefing.
"We're building something."
A coalition of species who refused to kneel. Admiral Hyunwoo, commanding the fleet from his flagship, studied tactical reports from across the galaxy. The Valeth Empire was vast, controlling hundreds of worlds. But cracks were showing. Reports came in of slave revolts, of Valeth commanders abandoning their posts, of entire star systems declaring independence. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we're detecting massive fleet movements in the Valeth core systems. They're pulling back from frontier worlds to defend their home territory." "Good," Hyunwoo replied. "They're scared. When you scare a bully, they either run away or they come at you with everything they have. Which do you think the Valeth will do?" Hyunwoo looked at the star charts showing the alien empire contracting around its core worlds like a wounded animal. "They're going to make their last stand at their home system," he said. "They'll gather every ship they have and wait for us to come to them." "Sir, that means we'll be facing their entire fleet. Thousands of ships." "Yes," Hyunwoo agreed. "But they'll be facing something they've never encountered before. Every species they've enslaved, fighting together with human tactics and human determination." The hunt was almost over. Soon humanity and its allies would face the full might of the Valeth Empire in a final battle. But first they had to survive the journey to the alien home system. And the Valeth, desperate and cornered, were about to show why their empire had lasted so long. The real war was just beginning. The final battle began not with the roar of engines, but with a single human voice singing an old Earth song about going home. General Hae-jin commanded the largest military force in human history from the bridge of the new flagship Starfire. Around her ship flew vessels from dozens of species, former slaves who had learned to fight like humans. They carried human weapons, used human tactics, and most importantly, they carried human anger. "All ships, this is Starfire," she broadcast to the Allied fleet. "Today we end the Valeth Empire, not for conquest, not for revenge, but for every child who ever had to bow to a tyrant." The Valeth home system blazed with defensive stations and warships. Every vessel the alien empire could gather waited in perfect formation around their homeworld. It was the most powerful fleet ever, assembled in galactic history. It was also about to learn why humans had never been conquered by anyone for very long. Woo Jin commanded the Liberation Fleet's main assault force. His ships were ugly things built from salvaged alien technology and human engineering. They shouldn't have been able to fly, let alone fight. But they carried something the Valith couldn't measure on their sensors: the fury of free people who refused to kneel. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "alien fleet is moving to intercept. They outnumber us 5-1. "Good odds," Wu Jin replied. "I was worried this would be too easy." His crew laughed, the sound carrying over the communication channels to ships throughout the fleet. The laughter spread, species after species adding their voices, the sound of free people who had found something worth dying for. Engineer Niyang watched her instruments as humanity's secret weapon powered up. Over the past months, human scientists working with liberated alien engineers had built something that shouldn't exist: a fleet of ships powered by controlled stars and armed with weapons that bent space itself. "Starfire reactors at full power," she reported. "Gravity weapons charging. Reality distortion fields active." The technology was insane, dangerous, and completely unstable. It was also the most human thing ever built, taking impossible ideas and making them work through sheer stubbornness. "All ships," came General Haijin's voice. "Begin the liberation of the Valith homeworld." The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries, assuming anyone survived to write about it. The Valith opened with their traditional overwhelming firepower, thousands of energy beams that should have vaporized the human fleet. Instead, they struck reality distortion fields that scattered the energy across multiple dimensions. Human ships appeared to be destroyed, only to reappear behind alien formations. "Impossible," transmitted a Valith commander. "Their ships exist in several dimensions simultaneously." "Welcome to human engineering," Wu Jin replied over open channels. "We build things that shouldn't work, and then we make them work anyway." But the real battle wasn't being fought with energy weapons or gravity bombs. It was being fought in the minds of every Valith warrior. Former philosophy professor Jun Seo had turned his study of human nature into the ultimate weapon. His psychological warfare teams bombarded the Valith collective consciousness with human concepts that their minds couldn't process. They transmitted human love songs into the alien network. Poetry about sacrifice and honor. Stories of individuals who chose to die rather than surrender their freedom. Art that celebrated chaos, creativity, and the beauty of imperfection. "Their collective mind is fragmenting," reported Dr. Yu Jin from her monitoring station. "Individual Valith are beginning to make independent decisions. Across the alien fleet, something unprecedented happened. Valith warriors began disobeying orders. Some refused to fire on evacuation ships carrying alien civilians. Others abandoned their posts to help damaged vessels escape the battle. For the first time in their history, the Valith were thinking as individuals. The effect was devastating. A military force built on perfect coordination and absolute obedience suddenly found itself filled with soldiers who questioned commands, who made personal choices, who valued their own lives over the collective mission. "Sir," a Valith officer reported to Commander Veltar, "Ship Groups 7 through 12 are refusing to engage human forces. They're saying the war is wrong." Veltar's compound eyes showed confusion. "Wrong? War cannot be wrong. War simply is." "Sir, they're using human concepts. They say they choose not to fight." On the human flagship, Lieutenant Seungwan prepared for the final assault. His ship was loaded with the last of humanity's nuclear weapons, but also with something more dangerous: a complete database of human culture, history, and philosophy. "Sir," he reported to General Haijin, "all systems ready for the final run. Remember," she told him, "we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to free them." Seungwan's ship dove toward the Valith command vessel, broadcasting on every frequency as he flew. Human music filled the alien network. Human art blazed across their visual displays. Human stories of freedom, love, and individual choice poured into minds that had never experienced such concepts. "This is humanity's gift to you," Seungwan transmitted as his ship approached the alien flagship. "The right to think for yourself. The right to choose your own path. The right to be more than just part of a machine." The Valith command ship's defenses didn't fire. The crew, experiencing individual thought for the first time, couldn't bring themselves to destroy a vessel that was trying to give them freedom. Instead, Commander Veltar himself responded. "Human vessel, your concepts are disturbing. They cause pain in our minds." "Growing pains," Seungwan replied. "Learning to think for yourself hurts at first. But it's worth it. How do we choose? By deciding what you want, not what you're told to want. By asking what's right, not what's efficient. By caring about others as individuals, not just as parts of a group. Across the Valith fleet, the psychological transformation accelerated. Ships stopped fighting and began rescuing survivors from damaged vessels. Commanders questioned orders that would cause unnecessary death. Warriors laid down weapons and asked to learn more about these strange human concepts. The battle was over, but the real victory was just beginning. On the surface of the Valith homeworld, resistance movements that had been crushed for centuries suddenly found themselves fighting alongside their former oppressors. Valith, who had learned to think individually, joined rebellions against their own government. "Sir," reported the communication officer, "we're receiving surrender requests from over half the alien fleet. But they're not surrendering to us. They're surrendering their old way of life." General Hyejin smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in months. "All ships cease fire. Begin rescue operations for all survivors, Valith and allied. And someone get me a communication channel to the entire galaxy." When the channel was open, her voice carried to every inhabited world in known space. "People of the galaxy, this is General Hyejin of the Human Liberation Fleet. Today the Valith Empire ended, not through conquest but through choice. The Valith people have learned to think for themselves, and they've chosen freedom." She paused, looking out at the ships around her. Human vessels, alien ships, former enemies now working together to save lives. But this isn't just about the Valith. This is a message to every tyrant, every oppressor, every empire that thinks they can force others to kneel. The galaxy has learned something new today. We've learned that freedom is contagious. We've learned that even the most perfect oppression can't stand against the simple idea that every person has the right to choose. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, enslaved peoples heard her words and began to understand what was possible. So to all the empires out there who think they can rule through fear, remember this day. Remember what happens when you threaten someone's family. Remember what happens when free people decide they've had enough. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes hard as steel. You demanded submission. We gave you Grins and Starfire. And now the whole galaxy knows. Humans don't kneel, and we're teaching everyone else to stand up too. The war was over. The real work of building a free galaxy was about to begin. 1 year after the battle that ended the Valith Empire, Ambassador Minseo stood before the newly formed Galactic Council. Representatives from over 300 species filled the Great Hall, each one a former slave who had learned to stand up straight. "Fellow beings," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "we gathered today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals who have chosen freedom." In the front row sat former Commander Veltar, now calling himself simply Vel. The transformation of the Valith had been the most dramatic change in galactic history. Learning to think as individuals had been painful for them, but they had adapted with surprising speed. Many now served as teachers, helping other former collective species learn the art of personal choice. 1 year ago, Minseo continued, humanity was a single planet facing an impossible enemy. Today we are a family of free worlds spanning the galaxy. This change didn't happen because humans are special. It happened because the idea of freedom is special. The applause that followed came from dozens of different species, each expressing approval in their own way. The Zilani whistled, the Kithara purred, the Voroks roared, and the humans clapped. It sounded like chaos, but it was the beautiful chaos of free people celebrating together. Dalsu, now heading the Galactic Defense Initiative, presented his first annual report. The GDI wasn't an army in the traditional sense. It was something new, a defense force that existed to protect freedom rather than conquer territory. "We've established defense stations in 47 systems," he reported. "But more importantly, we've trained over 2 million beings in what we call liberation tactics, the art of fighting for something greater than yourself." The GDI's ships were as chaotic as their crews. Human engineering combined with alien technology had produced vessels that looked like they were built in a junkyard, but could outfight anything in space. More importantly, they were crewed by volunteers who understood what they were protecting. "Sir?" asked a young Zilani officer during a training exercise. "Why do human tactics work so well?" Dalsu smiled. "Because we don't fight to win. We fight to make sure everyone else can choose their own path. When you're fighting for something that important, You find ways to do impossible things. Dr. Sunmi had established the Institute for Creative Warfare on the former Valeth homeworld, now renamed Liberty. The planet had become a symbol of transformation, a world where former oppressors and their victims worked together to build something new. The key to defeating tyranny, she taught her students, isn't better weapons or stronger ships. It's better ideas. Ideas are more dangerous to dictators than any bomb. Her classes were unlike any military academy in galactic history. Students learned psychology alongside strategy, art alongside tactics, and philosophy alongside weapons training. They studied human history not for the battles, but for the moments when ordinary people decided to do extraordinary things. Today we're going to examine the human concept of civil disobedience, Hachi announced to a class full of former slaves. This is the idea that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply refusing to obey unjust laws. A Vorok student raised a massive clawed hand. But Professor, what if the authorities use force? Then you use human stubbornness, Sunmi replied. You get back up, you keep saying no, and you make sure everyone sees what's happening. Tyrants hate being watched while they're being tyrants. Meanwhile, Gyumin and thousands of other human teachers had spread across the galaxy, establishing schools on liberated worlds. But they weren't teaching technology or military tactics. They were teaching something more dangerous: creativity. On the former slave world of Kronos, Gyumin watched his students work on their latest assignment, creating art that expressed their personal experiences of freedom. A young Kathera had painted a picture of herself standing in sunlight for the first time. Azalani had written a poem about choosing his own name. A former Valeth had sculpted something that looked like a prison breaking apart. Teacher Gyumin, asked the Kithara, why is art important for freedom? Because, he replied, art comes from inside you. It's your thoughts, your feelings, your view of the world. When you create art, you're proving that you exist as an individual. Dictators hate that. The transformation wasn't limited to former slave species. Across the galaxy, worlds that had never known tyranny began to change as human ideas spread. Democracy became popular on planets that had been ruled by kings for millennia. Individual rights became important to species that had always valued only group harmony. But the most dramatic changes were happening to the Valeth themselves. Vel sat in his garden on Liberty, teaching a group of young Valeth how to think independently. It was still difficult for them. Millions of years of evolution had designed them to think collectively. But they were learning. Today we practice making personal choices, he told his students. I want each of you to choose something you like, not because it's efficient or logical, but because it makes you happy. A young Valeth raised her hand. Teacher Vel, what did you choose? Vel pointed to his garden, full of flowers that served no practical purpose but were beautiful to look at. I chose to grow things that exist only to be pretty. It's completely illogical. I love it. The transformation of the Valeth was being watched with interest by xenobiologists across the galaxy. A species was literally evolving in real time, developing individual consciousness after millions of years of collective thought. Dr. Yu Jin, now heading the Galactic Institute for Biological Freedom, published regular reports on their progress. The Valeth brain is adapting to individual thought faster than should be biologically possible, she wrote. It appears that the capacity for independence was always there, simply suppressed by their social structure. Given the opportunity, even the most collective species can learn to value individual freedom. But not everyone in the galaxy was happy with the changes. Reports came in of new empires forming in distant regions, species that had seen what happened to the Valeth and were determined not to let human ideas corrupt their perfect societies. The hegemony of Zol had begun building fleets specifically designed to fight human tactics. The Crystal Throne had declared human philosophy to be a mental disease. They're coming, reported Captain Somin during a GDI intelligence briefing. New threats bigger than the Valeth, and they've studied our tactics. Good, replied Dalsu. Let them come. They're missing the point, sir. They think they can fight ideas with weapons. They can't. The idea of freedom isn't in our ships or our guns. It's in the mind of every being who has ever decided they deserve better than slavery. He looked around the briefing room at faces from a dozen different species, all of them volunteers who had chosen to stand guard over galactic freedom. Besides, he added, they're making the same mistake the Valeth made. What's that? They're giving us time to prepare. and humans are really good at preparing for fights we're supposed to lose. On Earth, now the unofficial capital of the free galaxy, children learned about the war through stories their parents told them. But the stories weren't about battles or weapons. They were about ordinary people who decided to do the right thing, even when it was impossible. "Tell us about Commander Yunji," asked a young girl during story time. Her grandmother smiled. Yunji was just a pilot like any other. But when Earth needed someone to carry nuclear weapons to alien ships knowing she would die, she smiled and volunteered. "Because that's what humans do. We protect our family even when it costs everything." What happened to her? She became Starfire, lighting up the darkness so others could see the way to freedom. The stories spread beyond Earth, told on 1,000 worlds in 100 different languages. They became legends, then myths, then something more powerful. Examples of what was possible when free people decided to stand together. And in the dark, between galaxies, new threats gathered their fleets and planned their conquest of these chaotic, illogical beings who had dared to upset the natural order of the universe. They would learn, as the Valith had learned, what happened when you threatened the human family. The galaxy was no longer a place where empires could demand submission and expect obedience. It had become something new, a place where the answer to tyranny was Grins and Starfire, where freedom was contagious, and where anyone who wanted to be free could learn how to stand up and fight. The age of galactic empires was over. The age of galactic freedom had begun, and somewhere in the outer rim, where new children were being born into a universe where they could choose their own destinies, humanity's greatest gift continued to spread. The simple, dangerous, beautiful idea that every person had the right to be free. The stars themselves seemed to smile.